welcome to our next skills session, where we will be talking about persona mapping or user journeys, and why those are important in a skills transformation as you get on with that journey. We'll give others about a minute or so to join in, but in the meanwhile, I'll quickly introduce myself and and the guest for today, Rinky. So I'm Sandeep Nahata, Managing Director at Talent Team, but also been a learning and skills consultant and a success factors consultant for about 23 years, supporting many organizations get on and get started with their skills journey. And I've got with and I've got with me colleague and a fellow SAP confidant and someone who's very knowledgeable and very well regarded in this space. If you have started looking at talent intelligence hub and skills and success factors, I'm sure you've come across one of Rinky's posts or blogs. So I'd love to welcome Rinky Karthik to the call as well. Rinky, a few words from yourself just to introduce your background.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sandeep. It's always a pleasure talking about skills with you. So hey everyone, I'm Rinky Karthik. I'm a Director of Product Success with SAP Product Management Team. I'm responsible for working with strategy customers primarily in the adoption of skills and the talent management area. I've been around the SAP HR ecosystem for the last 22 years. And last 7 years as an architect in talent management within Success Factor, primarily focused on talent intelligence. So really looking forward to this discussion. I know skills is close to both Sandeep, you and me. That's an area we discuss a lot. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here today.
Excellent. No, thank you. And thanks for taking the time to come on this. So we've started the series. I think we've had a couple of sessions so far. The first couple were based around building a business case. So if you haven't had a chance to watch those, please do access those on our website at talentteam.com. And today's session is focused on, as I said before, understanding persona mapping or understanding drawing out user journeys. The session here, there's no slides, no presentation, no demonstrations. It's really just a conversation, and we're going to be talking about designing those experiences. So I think the first area, and as we go through this as well, at any point, if you've got any questions or if you would like to essentially, present questions for anything we're discussing, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll come to those questions we'll incorporate those questions into our conversations. So Rinky, where I'd like to start is why is this important? So why understanding the journey matters? Persona mapping can sound a little bit fluffy sometimes, but if you do it right, what difference does it actually make in a transformation like this? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think before we talk about user journey or persona mapping, let's talk about what is a user journey in the context of skill or in the context of talent transformation. So when we talk about a user journey, there's no set definition, but I would say that it's a step-by-step experience a person, in this case, an employee, a manager, HR admin, or a leader has when engaging with skills inside the solution, in this case, success factor. So it's not about the system screen by screen. It's really about what they are trying to achieve and how skills enable or block that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great to start from who these people are and then being able to understand the journeys that they go on. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, so I think why persona mapping or user journey matter for skills again. So a skill transformation isn't just a data exercise, right? It changes how employees grow, how managers develop talent, how HR or the leaders plan for future. So persona mapping makes us ask, how does skills show up in someone's day-to-day life or day-to-day work life? For an employee, it could be seeing the relevant learnings tied to their career goals. For a manager, it's being able to quickly see a skills gap in their team or their direct reports. And again, without mapping those experiences, skills remain an abstract concept. And instead of something being tangible, it just become a data sitting somewhere. What's your experience? And I know you and your team has been working with some of the large and mid-sized customers. Do you see this as a common activity?
We do. I think where we're involved, we definitely tend to drive this as a very important activity. I think what I'm amazed at is quite often how often this activity is skipped in many customers as well. So
Right.
we've been talking to many customers trying to ensure that this becomes an important part of the journey.
Yeah.
I think, from what I've seen, if quite often organizations, especially looking to do pilots, etc., they don't really look through the entire landscape around skills, the impact that it can have, the
Yeah.
value drivers that it can create at different touch points in an employee's life. And
Mhm.
skills only really start to add value when everything that you do in the business, everything kind of connects to that single source. Because otherwise, as you said, skill just becomes another data point on an
Right.
employee's file, right?
Right.
For it to
No,
make work, for it to properly work, I think we've got to put that entire journey and make all of these things talk to each other.
right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the more you wanted to add to this?
No, no, I was
No,
just agreeing with you. I mean, I think the user journey brings the skills data more to life for employees or managers or HRBP, all those different personas.
absolutely. No, and again, quite often the focus is on tech, but as I said, I think without understanding every stakeholder's touch point and mindset, I think the adoption can start to fail. So I think, again, very, very important on why we should be doing this.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at this persona mapping, let's start to unpack this a little bit further, right? The obvious ones that come to mind are obviously employees and managers. But what
Right.
are the key personas that you otherwise see across most organizations when it comes to skills? And um, are there certain personas that quite often get ignored because they're not the obvious ones that come to mind?
Yes, and yeah, like you said, employee managers, HRBP, sometimes recruiters or learning admin, depending upon the use case this customer is working, are some of the typical personas we see. Uh, but again, often overlook based on the industry type, again, the frontline or deskless managers, right? Now, this is a key persona in any organization, if it is a manufacturing organization or even the airline industry, even the pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot of frontline or deskless managers who really don't have time to dig into the system, but they definitely need visibility into their team skills. So that's a persona I often see has been overlooked. We talk about managers, but not the deskless managers. And the employees like the contingent workers, right, or employees who are early in their career, so whose skills are not captured but are really critical. So when I say employees early in their career, I'm referring to those interns or those seasonal worker. Oftentimes we a lot of customers, a lot of organizations also hire them. So I would say these are the two personas I've seen even oftentimes are overlooked. Of course, I've also seen some of companies overlook leaders. Again, these are not regular managers or supervisors, but the C-suite. I mean, who only want a simple dashboard, maybe showing the workforce readiness, but that's where we stop. So, what about you? What other personas
Yeah.
you have seen other than that?
I think, I love the example that you picked out on the
Yeah.
deskless managers, because to be honest, I hadn't really thought about that one, right? I think, but again, depending on the organization that you work with, I think we would tend to work with the organization on finding these right personas to drive the journey for. As in the typical ones that I see, again, employee managers, HRBPs, recruiters, etc., being the common ones.
Yeah.
Senior leadership, again, being quite often kind of in play as well. But where I think sometimes things are ignored is like the middle managers as well.
Mhm.
So where you've
Mhm.
got the responsibility for a function or a department or or a region or a country, regional managers. Specifically, I think when we get into the retail sector, etc., as well, quite
Yes.
often they need access not just across their kind of a single store or the direct lines, etc., but they do need to be able to look at the skills across those areas. So I think those become quite important. I think the ones that I would say another one that I tend to look at, while not directly a persona, I
Yeah.
quite often tend to lay the organization itself as one as well, in terms of being able to see what does it actually, the value that it drives for the organization itself as a business, how does it change and how does it impact the business, which then helps you identify the touch points. It's a bit of a loose answer around the organization because they're not a real persona as such, but it is something that I find valuable as well. So yeah, I think that's what I've seen. And now I think the this actually helps us as we map as well. It really helps
Yeah.
us understand the pain points for each one of these, as well as the value points for each of these personas as well.
Right. Right. No, I think that's an interesting point, Sandeep. I never thought about the middle managers, because if you just look at managers, there can be various personas within manager, and each of those manager persona, may have a different journey, right? Like the mid managers, I've seen organization, they have this managers who are only approving time sheet, or they are but they're not part of their compensation decision. Some of the managers who are only responsible for the performance decision, but not necessarily, again, approving the time sheet. So I think within that managers, I believe that there can be multiple layers which we need to take into account while
Yeah.
planning those journeys. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's it's spot on, spot on.
Yeah. Yeah.
For anybody who joined the meeting a little late, I think if you have questions that you would add to the conversation Rinky and I are having, please feel free to put it into the chat or Q&A. We'll try and monitor both and incorporate those questions as we go on. Okay, so yeah, I think it was great to just talk through the different kind of personas. Um, you know, uh, I don't know if there's a value in being able to think about what a sample persona journey may look like, as in, let's say a frontline manager. From the example that you use,
Mhm.
how would it work like from the old way of working to a new skill-based future, as in what would that journey look like? How do you go around mapping it?
Yeah, I would say so the personas really help answer where do we start with skills, right? So maybe for employees, it's about surfacing personalized learning opportunity. For managers, it's a simple dashboard. It can be in performance, it can be elsewhere. For HRPP, it can be succession planning. So mapping those journeys let you prioritize which scenarios you are trying to solve first, um, or trying to skillify. So from a scope perspective, I would say, you know, again, it can be different for different business, different customer,
Yeah,
depending upon their, what problem they are trying to solve. But starting with, trying to answering this question, where do we start with skills, and what process we are trying to skillify, or what problem we are trying to solve? I think that's a great starting point. Um, and I've seen this often in some of my other discussions or webinars or blog posts, that start with one or two high value journey, right? For an employee persona, that can be updating skills or seeing the career opportunity, career path, or career progression. And for a manager, doing a talent review with the real time skills insight. So mapping those steps, test with real users, and refining along the way will definitely uh, build the momentum, and it will build the trust in the data too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think what you just highlighted, right? I think that helps with one appropriate communication change management.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think when we look at the overall adoption and skills transformation, any transformation doesn't really happen in a single shot, right? I think there are phases, there are, tweaks that you carry out to continually build upon it iteratively. So being able to, when you map out this process, as you suggested, I think it tells you exactly where you're able to get immediate value, something that you're able to focus on, and then, be able to plan the next set as well, instead of taking things as they come, right? Being able to,
Right, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so massive value in that.
Yeah, and I think you know I believe a good system integrator, or the SIs, or the implementation partner, um, who are working with customers, they should not only focus on configuring the solution, or designing the solution, but also help customers in designing these user journeys, which is very essential, right? What do you
It
think?
is so critical. It is so critical because I think, already I think in conversation that we are having, right, we're talking about different kind of scenarios which may only apply to an industry, right? When we
Correct.
talk about, for example, I gave an example of retail. You talked about the factory-based or field-based middle managers or managers, etc. as well. So we've talked about different examples, and
Yeah.
every organization would have slightly different set of personas, different set of journeys depending on the landscape that they have. So
Mhm.
it is very important that it's not just a technology implementation where you can follow a guide to
Yeah.
configure it and
Yeah.
implement it. I think
Yeah.
that's really where the consulting organizations can come in understanding how it best applies to your organization.
Correct.
And of course, that's really where I think we've been helping and supporting a lot of these organizations work out first what is it that you need to be doing, and then helping them execute upon that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. And I'm just going to say that, that's really essential because traditionally in HR tech implementation, I have seen back in the days, when we talk about a design workshop, we really focus on configuring the solution based on the requirement. Take the requirement, configure the solution, which is more siloed. We never talk about the end-to-end. I mean, we talk about the end-to-end process from a system side, but not from the point of view of a persona, like an employee or manager. How do they see certain data points moving from one process area to the other process area? So I think aligning that during the design phase is really important,
that's right.
because that will really make sense the way you are configuring the system.
Absolutely. And Rinky, both you and I have been in many conversations where we've been, trying to guide the customers through
Right.
what that journey on skills looks like,
It's
and
like, yeah,
why it's important to make sure that every step is executed kind of with,
yeah, right.
I think with the detail that it requires, right, with the diligence that it requires, rather
Yeah,
than kind of treating them as optional and skipping over, because that then eventually leads into problems with adoption and challenges.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So if I asked you a question, right? So what does bad change look like if we assume that everyone's experience is the same, which, as I said, many customers aren't doing a persona mapping. So,
Right.
whether implicitly or not, but I think it's assumed that, everyone's experience is the same. They don't really need this. We don't need this persona mapping exercise. Um, what happens when organizations don't map these journeys? What do we miss out on?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot to miss out on. I think I kind of highlighted when we're talking about the design. We focus on typically a lot. I've seen a lot of system integrators, they focus on only the system part, but what really they miss out is if you don't have that journey mapping. um, Again, relevant to skills, we are talking about skills, it becomes a taxonomy dump. So you have skills data, it's a new shiny object. So you have skills in performance process, you have skills in succession process, let's put skills in the career pathing process. But what value it is driving for your business or for your organization, that's what we miss out. I mean, is the employee going to come back again to the solution because they see value that the skills data help them with, seeing a new career that they didn't know existed in the company? Or was the skill data really driving the managers back to the system so that they can actually see a difference between their direct reports, who is focusing on, who's more closer to, a specific job role that they're supposed to, that requires specific skills, which is part of their organization. So I think that meaningful value from the system is what we'll miss out if we don't have those user journeys defined or the experience defined. It becomes, like I said, it becomes a taxonomy dump. Skills becomes another data just living in various places without the proper link or proper experience.
Absolutely. And I think also, it then starts to introduce confusion, resistance,
Yeah,
disengagement from the employees, managers, etc. as well. And I think, worse even, sometimes it can then start to create shadow processes or people bypassing the system
Correct. Yeah.
because the journey, the communication isn't there around how skills are going to be mapped across the organization. And the worst part, I think, can quite often come as, like you mentioned, that some of the integrators, they tend to focus too much on the technology. But when it doesn't work, the business
Right.
will assume that the system isn't working, right?
Right. Yeah.
When in fact it was the experience that wasn't designed properly.
Exactly. And I think that's what I have seen a lot. And I've talked to many customers, and most of them complain that, okay, we are going live with growth portfolio, we are going live with skills, but we're not seeing the engagement from the employee. Because oftentimes, so again, traditionally, if you see implementations in general in SAP success factors, there is a tendency for a lot of customers to going with, let's start small, which is a great thing. Like
Yeah,
start with some features and then we'll scale. That's the right thing. But that starting small, you need to make sure it's a connected experience. You just can't start with just just a database or data point. For example, a customers I've seen, they just start with, we'll just enable growth portfolio so that employee can see what skills they have. Okay, I can see what skills I have, but what's next? It kind of stops there, the experience. So at least start with some basic experience. Let the employee see value. Maybe they get some learning recommendation based on the skills they have. They get some career recommendation, some mentor recommendation, at least some kind of experience, not just the data down.
absolutely. And I think it goes to, I think, what both of us have been talking about, into starting small, starting with a simpler journey. But I think it's
Right.
also very important in being able to communicate the value of the journey that people are on. So while we, start with learning or career development, I think in the change management, communications, etc., I think it's important to highlight the importance of growth portfolio, right? What is initially being launched versus what the business plans may be around making skills a currency across HR or across the business. I think those also I've seen drive a better adoption in terms of why people should update their growth portfolio,
Right.
because while there's some value that they can kind of be involved in today, there's some value immediately to get out of. They
Yeah.
also understand the wider value that it will bring in the longer term. So then they will
Right.
be quite often eager to engage. I think if you just put growth portfolio out, I agree. I know of a customer who
Yeah.
was about to do that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because, I mean, yes, as an employee, I mean, I log into success factor. Let's say I'm going to see growth portfolio. Yes, I have all these skills, but then what? I mean, I'll see it for a
Correct.
day or two, but it's not driving me to do anything. So there is no engagement, especially.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about skills, I'm sorry, I'm just having some problem with my glasses. When we are talking about skills, the the key use cases typically we focus on our internal mobility. You want to have a skills-based internal mobility or skills-based succession planning for administrators, or skills-based hire, right, from a recruiter point of view, or maybe it's skills-based upskilling. Employee wants to get better in the same job, not necessarily looking to move. So those are some key use cases or experience that I will think organizations need to focus on and make sure that they are designing the employee or user journey in such a way that those experiences are addressed with the skills data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, it makes complete sense. I guess a question around, s- how do journeys help define the scope as well, right? Because I think as quite often get into the journey, we've
Yeah.
talked a lot about the use cases, etc. And I
Yeah.
believe one of the key elements of the mapping the journey out is it starts to define the scope, not just for the initial one, that's easy to define, but the
Right.
overall wider scope of skills in the business.
Right. Um, so I think again that I'll go back to different personas. Let's say if I'm talking about the HR administrators or HR BPs, um, one of the key process that skills is attached is succession planning or skills-based succession planning. So so mapping journey, I'm just giving that as an example, but mapping journeys let you prioritize which scenario to solve first instead of trying to, again, bringing the skills data or sprinkling the skills data everywhere. Um, So when we talk about scope one, addressing which problem we are trying to solve, like we said, is it skills-based hiring, or skills-based internal mobility, or skills-based succession planning. But once you prioritize that specific area, then let's see how your managers or leaders, in this case of succession planning, how do they currently interact with the system? How do they traditionally do succession planning, and how that process will change if skills is part of the process now. Similarly, for a manager, if they do performance evaluation, if they have those performance discussion with employees, how do that process change if there is skills in the skills is part of the discussion, or part of the flow, or part of the user journey? Are they going to use the skills data beforehand to see their direct reports portfolio, or what kind of upskilling they have done throughout the years, so that they can provide them meaningful advice? So I think once you figure out the key process you're trying to solve, maybe it's all of the above, maybe it's skills-based hiring, skills-based succession planning, internal mobility, or skills-based upskilling, maybe all those four big processes, then going down, like going to a L2 or L3 level for each of the processes, and figuring out how those smaller details within each process where skills is involved will change. What How does it look like today, and how does it look like tomorrow? So that will
Yeah.
really in defining the scope.
No, makes complete sense. I think it's quite often it's the bridge from strategy to execution as well, right? Kind of it helps us actually from
Correct.
putting
Yeah.
it on paper down to actually executing it. And
Yeah.
it can help us make sure that we don't over-engineer or under-deliver, because we can actually focus on exactly what makes a difference to each user. Right. So I think it becomes important from that perspective as well. And also, I think when we start to lay this all out, it also doesn't make it, avoids it being too overwhelming as well, because once you've laid out the journey, you're able to focus on certain aspects, knowing what's ahead, what's next as well. There was a customer I was speaking to who, and these are examples on where, while a lot of the examples we've been talking about are within success factors, processes within success factors, I think
Mhm.
it goes beyond success factors as well. There are organizations who use success factors learning, but not the other modules. There are customers who use all of success factors, but not the recruiting module, as an example. And the
Mhm.
recruiting was an example that I was talking to a customer where they're using it on one of the bespoke systems. And it was important for them to be able to have the flow of data of skills between the two
Right.
platforms. Again, a large professional services firm, or even if we look at support desks, etc., in many
Yeah.
organizations, being
Yeah.
able to know the skills of people, right, can massively enhance the experience within those platforms.
Yeah.
So, when you define the journey, you start to think about what are the platforms these people operate on.
Yeah.
Can skills add value into any of these? Do they have the capability to handle skills, and how do you work with them to create an exchange of data of skills?
Yeah.
So,
And Sandeep, I'll say, like I said, I've been around the SAP HR ecosystem for 22 years. Started with SAP on-prem and then SuccessFactors since 2012. Um, and I'll say in the past, when we are working with a customer and when we are designing a solution in this design workshops, or what we normally call 2B workshops, the focus has always been, like I was saying, the solution. How do I configure? So if you have a new hire event or new hire action, this is how SuccessFactor would do, or some other solution would do, and this is how I'll configure the solution. I think traditionally we have never paid attention to the user journeys, right? Which is what is the HR tech industry has changed, and which is what a lot of the system integrators or a lot of the product company like us, we are asking the SIs to pay attention to. So configure the system from a point of view of the user journey, not just the solution, because I think that's one of the beauty of cloud solution. It gives you the flexibility to actually mold it based on how your employees would interact with the system. And also it gives you the flexibility, even though you have multiple partners. I mean, and these partners can be other solution partners. So again, going back to this design workshop, I think we need to see it from a new lens, focusing on user journeys, those employee experience, employee manager, again, different persona experience, and what kind of value they are getting out of the system. At the same time, maintaining the data integrity, of course.
I completely, couldn't agree more. I think in a lot of the conversations we have with customers who want to implement skills, when we are asked to scope it out, and quite often the definition of scoping becomes what is it that we're implementing, so
Right.
however,
Absolutely.
I think a question that if somebody's if any of my team comes to me and says, oh, there's a
Yeah.
customer who wants to implement skills, right, so what is the
Yeah.
skills? But my bigger question is why, right? Let's first
Exactly.
understand why are they implementing skills, because that will
Yeah.
define the scope, not
Yeah.
necessarily what. Because success factors can be configured fairly straightforward and easily. To be honest, it's not that complicated to configure it, as long as all the pre-work has been done in terms of the strategy, the data preparedness, and the strategy obviously is being determined by the why.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
And you won't believe I've been called into many customer meetings. These are all pre-sales kind of meeting, and the customer would go and say, "Oh, we want to enable this, that, and this feature." I'm like, and I've always asked, "But why? Why do you need that?" So, what problem you are trying to solve? I know a lot of time my sales team don't like me asking those questions, but
Yeah.
you just don't want to enable a bunch of solution without thinking through what problem you are trying to solve. Are you trying to address any specific issue that your employees are experiencing today, or your managers, or your HRBP, and you were trying to address this problem so that it will help your business ultimately, or your organization strategy. So yeah.
Absolutely. And for any customers on the call, I would definitely suggest that I think as you go to any consulting partners around the implementation of skills, make sure that you first answer why that you're implementing skills. You would know the answer, but being able to articulate that will help you get better value out of whoever you speak with. And if you're, a partner of success factors, who implements it, start asking your customers why they're implementing. I think there's going to be value this being asked either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Rinky, what would be your advice for teams who want to begin the persona mapping? Is there a practical way to start this without turning it into really month-long or months-long engagements and projects?
Yeah. So I think the old method works, right? Going back to whiteboard. It can be mural or whiteboard, but kind of drawing out. So let's pick one process. Let's pick a persona. So maybe let's talk about both of our favorite, career progression or career development. So let's pick that process. Now let's write down the different personas that interact with that process. There's an employee looks at their career progression. There's a manager might have a point of view on their direct reports career progression, right? There is an HRBP who actually designs some of those. There's AI suggested career path, but sometimes the HR team also designs some of those career paths. So taking that process and going back to whiteboard, how does this process looks like today? What are the different steps my employee is engaged? Maybe they are in the same solution. Let's say if says let's say success factor, maybe this customer is already using success factor, but no skills. So what is the process that looks like for the employee today? What is the process that looks like for manager or HRBP or leaders? And then how that will change once skills is involved, because it brings in more point of view, more value. So again, like I said, the traditional method, going back to whiteboard, mural, but the visuals, that's really helps. And that's
And
where I would start. And we have done this exercise actually for a few customers. Um, you know, if you remember my 5 building blocks when you start with Talent Intelligence Hub or your skills journey, one of the key journeys, once you define your skill strategy, your job strategy, the third thing is mapping the user journey or the user persona. And that needs to be a all hands deck. You have your business team in the room, you have your IT team, and definitely somebody to help with from the system integration team, and then go back to whiteboard. Uh, Map out what the process looks like today, what it will be different with skills, not just from a process point of view. You might need to integrate some additional solutions also. So that's where I would start. The
yeah, I'd say, I guess kind of in summary as well, kind of mapping the current state,
Yeah.
identifying the target state, the pain points, and what interventions you bring in to cover those pain points. And as a, yeah,
Sorry,
sorry,
Sandeep. I
go
just
on.
wanted to add one more thing, and actually, this is a customer that was actually one of our first customer that went with Talent Intelligence Hub, um, a big airline industry. They actually went even an extra step, and during the design process, when we were doing this whiteboarding exercise, so we actually, they involved employees from the ground staff, or some of the office workers, asking them what do they hope to see in their career path. Actually, that was really helpful. I mean, when you ask this different type of persona their point of view, you will be so amazed to learn what they are thinking versus what HR was thinking. So I think that was really a cool exercise, and it really gave them much
I
to ponder. Yeah.
couldn't agree. That's exactly what I was just going to say, that, involve people, right?
Right.
Involve your personas into these conversations, co-create with them. Don't just assume that you know what their
Right.
experience is like.
Yeah.
And, I think employees, managers, they'll tell you what's broken if, if they're asked the right way, and if they're
Exactly.
told kind of what you're working towards and improving.
Yeah.
They're talking about the pain points. It's pain points. They want them to get addressed. If you can help. So I think if you're trying to help, they'll always be willing to share.
Right, right. Yeah. So creating those focus group with real people, real employees, real supervisors, real, let's say, compensation manager or talent managers or real HR VPs, not just your system integration team or your core project team from the customer side designing this process, but creating this focus group, getting the feedback from them. What do they want to see? That really
Correct.
helps. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. So no, it's been fantastic, and I think the in summary as well as what I'd say is that when we talk about skills-based organization, and we talk about it a lot, I think it isn't just built on tech alone, right? It's
Yeah.
built with the everyday experience of the people who are interacting with these systems, right? As in, we can start to put technology, we can start to infer skills, but unless it really starts to add value to the people who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis, who are able to benefit from this, you don't, as a business, you don't start to see the value. If you don't
Correct.
understand the people that you're trying to drive this change for, you
Yeah.
won't be able to design the change that they can adopt.
Right. And again, I often say this in many of my meetings, that instead of boiling the ocean with a giant skills taxonomy rollout, or trying to enable this feature versus that feature, I want to enable growth portfolio or this solution, focus your phase one on maybe employee, or maybe your focus of phase one is on manager, but focus on that persona. So, I mean, if you can do it all, that's the best scenario. But I will focus on the persona or the user journey if I have to go phase by phase. So maybe phase one is employee skills, employee can see their career opportunity. Phase two is like a manager who can do talent review with skills. Um, I mean, it's really not drastically, drastically time differentiated phases, but just going, one after the other. You got the idea what I'm trying to say,
I
yeah.
do. I obviously see a massive value, and I think we both suggest the same thing, which is start with the pilot, start small, etc. But
Right,
I
right,
think a very important thing that I do always call out when talking about pilots and phase ones is that before you launch, kind of go live with phase one, make sure you know what your phase two and your phase three are, right?
exactly.
And
Yeah,
once again, comes down to the personas. If you know what your persona and the employee journeys and the different persona journeys are, it can
yeah,
help you define these. Because when you launch in a smaller use case, whether it's a simple use case or a smaller population, either only employees or only managers, once again, I think unless you're able to define what the long-term value, what the value that is yet to come is, I
right,
think
right.
it'll otherwise always fall short of expectations that people have in
Yeah,
being able to see one big wide launch, right? So unless you're going for that big bang launch, I think
correct.
make sure that you identify your phases upfront. Um, phases will change. There's no doubts about it. The speed at which technology is changing, capabilities and how we do things are changing. The definition of these phases may change. However, being able to define them, I think will help a lot with adoption and engagement. And doing this exercise that what Rinky and I have been talking about, I think helps you define those phases with a lot more clarity, help you manage your communications a lot better.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
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 So I think, to be honest, Rinky, that's all I had in terms of my conversation. I think there's a few questions, and apologies, I didn't really bring up these questions in the middle of the chat because I think while directly related to skills,
Yeah.
transformation, they weren't directly to persona, but also we're happy to take any questions if others have any questions as well. So I'll start with the first question from Meena. We are starting a skills journey and need help in thinking through the strategy across all talent modules. What can come first and what can come next? Where should we start? Rinky, do you want to take a stab and then I'll add?
Yes, I think this is exactly what we were just discussing, right? What can come first and what can come next actually goes back to what is your key concern area right now? Do you see a lot of attrition because you don't have the right people? Then you are focusing on skills-based recruiting. Um, is the problem because you have a lot of attrition because your employees are leaving because they're not seeing the right growth path, or they're not able to find the career they had come for? Not, it's not just a job, it's a career. So if you are collecting those feedback during exit interview, you would know. But I would say focus on the problem you are trying to solve. Maybe maybe it's, if your employees, they're not seeing enough growth opportunity within the same role, then upskilling is a great use case to start with. A lot of time a small survey always helps in understanding the pulse of your employees. So I would, like I said, I would try to solve the problem for the organization that your employees are facing, and the best way to start is maybe with a survey, right?
Absolutely. And I've done, multiple sessions, webinars, etc., as well in the past, giving customers more of a blueprint around how you go on this journey, things to think about. So I do suggest, either have a look at our talentteam.com under the recorded webinars to find some previous posts around that, because they go into quite a bit of detail around getting started on your skills journey. But of course, feel free to reach out as well and we can help. We've got, I've been recommending to customers on quite a structured approach around identifying, first answering the question around why, then going into this persona mapping that we're talking about, being able to understand and undertake your data. And to be honest, while a lot of companies are focusing on the data elements, and it's true, I'm not saying take any focus away from that because that exercise takes longer. However, while that data exercise is going on, I think either prior to that or alongside, being able to identify persona will mean that your data outputs are better, because if you understand data needs to where the skills data needs to travel, you'll be able
Yeah,
to get a better understanding on the level of details you need in your data, right?
right, right.
So I think
Absolutely.
these go hand in hand as well.
Yeah.
So, hopefully that answers the question. I see the next question from Marzena, and I think there's another one from Mina, and I believe the answers are quite similar for both of them. And Marzena, good to see you again, or at least have you here. I think, we've obviously interacted before. Before starting the configuration, what is the best way to start building the skills? Does it have
Mhm.
to be a tedious manual effort, or is there a smoothish journey a company can follow? Let's complicate the scenario and add that there might not be a job architecture in place.
Yeah. This
And
question is
now,
set
I
perfectly for you, Sandeep.
I know, it's like it's been framed for me. So I'll let you answer first before I
No,
pitch
no,
into how we
I was
help.
actually going to, I was actually going to refer to you
No,
that
okay.
I think you are the best position to answer this.
Absolutely. So I think, first of all, of course, going down the tedious manual one is completely the wrong way in this day and age, right? Because I think many organizations have done it. They have, you get temporary success out of it, right? The temporary success is depending on how long it takes. If it takes you a few months, sure. But if you're a large organization, by the time you end up finishing it, you've got to start all over again, because the labor market is changing quite massively, the technologies are changing, and the skills that are required for roles are changing very dynamically at the moment. So it is important that we've got some sort of an automated solution that is able to, one, I think, accelerate the journey for you, but at the same time also help it keep it maintained on an ongoing basis as well. Marzan, I'm going to start with your complicated process. So there are, if there's no job architecture in place, and again, here I am going to plug the talent team services and accelerators that we have. We do have tools available which can take, there's two different starting points. Either an organization that simply has no job architecture in place at all, simply a set of job titles. We've created our own IP accelerators, which will take these job titles and immediately, kind of first rationalize that data, so normalize that data a bit, then be able to identify your job families, then identify the job roles that align to those, as well as then producing the data in a format that can be imported into success factors. For organizations that may already have this data but are looking at modernizing it, because quite often this has been done based on compensation in the past. But when you start to look at a skills based job architecture, there may be certain adjustments that are carried out. So we also have the ability to be able to take an existing job framework and modernize it based on skills. A third scenario that we're currently working on and adding is where, in case of an acquisition, where an organization has a defined job architecture in place, but you've acquired another business, and now we need to align this new organization or a new business unit that you may have acquired into your existing job architecture. So these are scenarios that we support with in defining the job architecture. Once a job architecture is defined, then there are talent team obviously supports it, but there are other vendors, other partners, etc. as well that can actually take this data and actually help you identify what skills are required for each of the roles, and being able to hence help you build a skill library, but also help tag all of your learning content with skills. Again, SAP also has certain AI capabilities that can help with some of this to a certain extent. But again, it's important to understand what tools and accelerators are available across the SAP ecosystem, the what is known as the open skills ecosystem. So it's important to understand that. As I said, talent team we've been supporting many organizations with that. So again, we'd be happy to have a chat if that is a challenge, where you are. So Mina, I believe that does answer your question as well, around the being able to leverage AI for skills taxonomy. Um, Are there any other questions? I'm also happy to, Mina, I believe you've got your hand up. Mina, I'm actually going to allow you to talk so we can make it more conversational as well. So if you want to unmute and come, and if anybody else wants to speak as well, please feel free to, raise your hand and I'll unmute you one at a time. Mina, is there a question you want to ask? Do you want to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Can
can.
you hear me okay? Okay, so sorry, I had to step away for a few minutes and I came back, so I was not sure if my first question was answered. Um, we are on a journey. If you're looking at skill taxonomy, and we just have Employee Central Live. We're looking at all of talent modules. So we are on the strategy building for like which should come first, and also looking at job architecture right now, which is going live next year. So it's like
Sure.
everything coming together for us at one time.
Fantastic.
We are looking at like what is next 3 to 5 years going to look like, and how should we shape it. And again, we have spoken to many organizations who offer skill taxonomy, but how, where it will plug in, and where, what should our strategy look like is what I think debating.
Of course.
And that's why I joined this workshop. So it has offered a perspective for sure, but I would want to see how we can partner and see if, actually you can help us through this journey. So
Absolutely. And Mina, we did answer your question. So, it will be available in recording as well, but I'll do a summarized
perfect.
version
Thank
right
you.
now as well. That, there are, I think Rinky suggested that a lot of what we've talked through today as well in being able to identify the use cases, which will then, which are your biggest burning, biggest pain points, whether it's the need for, you're lacking certain talent within your business. So whether recruitment kind of becomes the key focus, or other
Mm-hmm.
areas, or talent development is your key focus when it comes to people retention and things like that. That can help define some of this. Additionally, what I talked about is that there's a proper framework that we offer in being able to get on this this journey and understanding exactly what it is. And that framework actually starting with why skills, what value does it provide to your business, then getting into persona definition. From there on, we go into data review, understanding, what data you have, how does it support the skills journey, what data we need, and being able to create a complete roadmap for you for skills. This again, you can then start to again, this is all very personalized to you as an organization. Of course, you can then look into it, align it with your business goals, and have a business plan that you can take to your stakeholders, get approvals, and start implementing. Yeah. So again, kind of feel free to reach out. I can also reach out, but happy to help and support on this journey.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, perfect. Just checking. Any other questions from anyone?
There's a new question from Jay.
Okay, perfect. From Jay, we already have a defined and implemented job architecture, but given the skills are defined at the role level in success factors, I'm struggling how our defined architecture will fit with skills. I think there may be high resistance internally to change the job architecture. Any advice? Rinky, once again, I'll let you start, and I'm happy to obviously support.
Yes, and if I understand it correctly, you were saying that you have already defined your job architecture in success factor, meaning you have defined your job family, your job role, and the job profile. So that's a great thing. So when we say skills are attached to job roles, when you define your job architecture, you're basically saying that these are the job roles, and this is what I want the people who are coming in the job role needs to do, and these are the skills they need. So I think that's a good thing that you have defined the job architecture, and now you are attaching the skill because you know, let's say a sales manager, right? So you know what the sales manager should do. It's defined. It's kind of defined in their job profile, and now you're trying to kind of map what skills they need to do that job. So from a configuration standpoint, in SuccessFactors, there are some, you know, there are some options. For example, you can write a business rule for any exception skills. Looking at your foundational, the HRIS elements, but that's more on the configuration side. But I'm still trying to understand why that should be a concern internally. Is there any other angle that we are not, maybe if you want to share?
And Jay, I've allowed you can unmute and speak as well. I think if you would like to, I've kind of enabled you for that.
Yeah.
And I agree with Rinky that having the job architectures almost a precursor to being able to start on the skills journey. So having a job architecture is a fantastic starting point to have. It's in no way a limiting factor. Of course, your job architecture quite often will define how granular and how detailed you can get with skills, but it's definitely not a limiting factor. It's more of an enabling factor, something that we actually struggle with many organizations who haven't properly defined this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jay, if you'd like to come off mute, feel free to. If the question's answered, let us know as well. I'm happy to take any other questions as well. Okay. I see there's about 7 minutes remaining. So once again, happy to take questions, but at the same time, I want to extend a massive thank you to Rinky for joining me on this, coming for a chat. It's been absolutely amazing to have these chats as opposed to the typical
Yes.
presentations and demos and webinars, etc., that we've been doing. So I'm really, I've really enjoyed our chat today. Once again, I heavily recommend anybody getting on a skills journey, go to the SAP community and search for Rinky Karthik, and you'll know the wealth of knowledge that you were talking to today, right? I think
Thank you.
everything around skills, I think Rinky's been defining what good looks like. So I massively appreciate, Rinky, you taking the time and joining us on this call and essentially sharing your expertise with us. So it's been fantastic. And if any of you are at SAP Connect or Success Connect in Vegas, both Rinky and I will be there. And I'm sure I speak for you as Rinky when I say we'd welcome and love to have a chat around skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's always great to talk to you, Sandeep, on this shared common area. But thanks for having me.
No, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank
Hope
you.
you enjoyed it. And the recording will be available. It'll probably arrive in your email in the next couple of days. All right. Thanks all. Cheers. Bye, Rinky.